Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Alchemi-Culture Podcast. I am your host, Phoenix Aurelius, and today we are joined by Dr. Carina Lopez. Karina and I have been friends for a couple of years now. It's been since about 2017 or 2018, I think, when I met her. She is the wife of one of my very dear friends and a student of mine, and she currently lives in Greece, although initially she was living in New York when I first met her. She is one of the most cutting-edge homeopaths, especially that I've ever seen, but she has a number of different degrees and certifications. And so we will be chatting with her today. Dr. Karina, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I am so excited to be here on your show, and I'm really honored for your friendship. And God, my husband Sakis, he just adores you, and we love and treasure you.
Oh, well, that's so sweet. Yeah, of course, that's a very, very, very mutual feeling about you both. There are few people that are as near and dear to my heart as you are. Although some of them I've interviewed this season, so I'm sharing y'all with the world. So, Karina, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background in naturopathy, homeopathy, herbalism, etc. And let's just kind of set a background for what your professional background looks like. And then I have some more juicy questions that I'd like to get into.
I'm looking forward for the juice. And so I'll start with, I guess, a little bit about my journey. So I started in regular medical school, right? I actually wanted to be an alternative doctor because I was always into alternative medicine. I'm Puerto Rican. My mother, is into all of the herbs and all of that. And I grew up with eczema. And so, had lots and lots of herbs growing up. But, I had to be the doctor, for my family tree. I had to be the first one who, made it with that big medical degree. And so I got in and I got depressed and I got really, really, really down. I mean, all of the shadows came down. I got sick. I was on more drugs than some of my elderly patients that I would see while I was,
Wow.
an intern in medical school. And they said, "You're going to have to take this for life." And I said, "Wait, I'm going to be all drugged up and I'm just going to drug up everyone. That's like my thing. Like, this is where I am."
Wow.
And I remember I was so sick. And this woman, she looked at me and she said, "Maybe you should try alternative medicine. There's a iridologist." I said, "I don't know what that is, but all right, whatever, let's go." I love alternative medicine. And I remember even in med school, I had the steroids for my eczema plus putting turmeric. I mean, just crazy. You don't know what you're doing,
Yeah,
And
true.
so when you're in that headspace where you think that medicine is actually, something that can heal, right? If you even touch that, then you're already far, far gone, right?
Usually.
Usually. And so I said, "Okay," I went to this iridologist and she looked in my eye and she says, "I don't know you. I don't know where you're from, but if you continue where you're going, you're going to die." I said, "Holy shiitake mushrooms."
Right?
Right? And she was right. So I left and I called her up and she said, "Yeah." And I started, right? But where do I start? So I went online and I was like, alternative school, I don't know. And Dr. Christopher showed up, famous herbalist. And I remember when I was in Einstein, Albert Einstein, they said, if you're going to go to any other alternative school, you have to go to John Bastyr.
Oh, right.
And I said, nothing against John Bastyr, but if my medical school told me that that's the pinnacle one, then I've got to go far from that. I've got to go somewhere else, right? I want a different perspective. So I picked the Naturopathic College, University of Bridgeport, that actually just closed down a few years ago because they didn't have a license to prescribe in Connecticut.
Wow.
So that's right. So anybody who went to that clinic, they only had the herbs and the alternative medicine. That's it. Or they say, go to the doctor, go to the hospital, right? That's all they could do. Emergency care, or we see it now. And then I did Dr. Christopher's herbal school, which is an online school on top of becoming this licensed naturopathic doctor. But then I said, the licensed naturopathic doctor is not teaching me the ancient alternative diagnostic techniques,
At all.
at all. That's teaching me more functional medicine and homeopathy, which is brilliant. Oh, I love homeopathy. I mean, I love resonance, right? But I said, I got to learn something else. So I went to acupuncture school because I had to learn the tongue diagnostics, the body diagnostics, the pulse.
Yes.
But then I said, you know what? Naturopathic college now, when you're licensed, you gotta kind of succumb to certain things to get a license. But what did the old naturopaths do? Why they used iridology. So I went and I learned from an Australian iridology. And then I also learned from a beautiful man in California who does sclerology, which is the whites of the eye, to help with the assessment and understanding what's going on. So using the acupuncture, the naturopathic medicine, the homeopathy, right? Because homeopathy, how many millions and millions of people are being helped with homeopathy in India? I said, I got to go to India.
Yeah. It's huge in India.
It's huge in India. And I remember I graduated naturopathic college and I loved homeopathy. I was really into the alternative medicine because I had just come from medical school.
Right.
And I looked at my friend at the time and she said, where are you going next? I said, I'm going to India. I have a mentor there. She goes, you don't got a mentor there. Why you just making what are you doing? But I believed it. And that's followed me through my life. Like when I say something, man, it's coming.
Yeah.
And within the year, I found myself Bob Street, who was the head of a homeopathic clinic run since 1920 something, treating for free people. But just because it was free didn't mean that rich people didn't come, because guess what? It was helping. And I saw his cases in the Bronx. I was sitting in the Bronx and this acupuncturist said, you got to meet my friend Bob because you're studying for the acupuncture license and their exams, but you're only talking about homeopathy. And my friend Bob is a homeopath. So I go and I meet him and I see his cases and it's miraculous. And I said, I'm going with you. And he said, what? And I said, you just met me. And I said, I'm going with you. When are we going? So I took the ticket and I went to his clinic and I spent a few months there. Then I studied with George Vathilkis in Greece, and the story starts with homeopathy. And it's just using this alternative medicine to really think about the mind, the body, the spirit, traditional systems. I even went to Latin America, had myself the beautiful womb massage, learning how to heat someone up, bring their vitality, their constitution. I mean, that's what healing is. I even have a friend who's the nephew to the uncle of the uncle is the physician of the Dalai Lama, and he's his nephew.
Wow.
And I sat, oh yeah. It's wonderful, 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 wonderful man. And so, Dr. Dawa, and he sat with me and we talked about Tibetan healing bowls. And I remember being sick and needing Tibetan healing bowls. So so all these different modalities to really bring the spirit up.
That's pretty amazing. So you have basically, in summary, an enormously wide background in alternative and natural medicine forms, really, and diagnostic forms, which I think is really important. Being able to take, pulse diagnostics, tongue diagnostics, the iridology, eye diagnostics, and
face diagnostics.
What did you say?
Face diagnostics.
Yeah. Which, did you learn that as phrenology or personology?
I learned that from Lillian Bridges, who had a heritage in using facial diagnostics through her own personal culture, through her lineage in China. She died. And so it's using Chinese medicine and thinking about the organs through the face. And you think about color, you think about the lines, you think about, even the Shen, like the heart, right? It's present in the eyes. People say they got crazy eyes. They're crazy. And you can see someone's eyes and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Shen disturbed,
right? Like, I don't need to be a doctor, but those eyes, woohoo.
Yeah.
And so you know, it's just being present with the spirit of the person, right? You know, I was just talking to a dear, you know, family friend, a family member, but you know, distant family member. And her husband just passed. And you can see, you know, deep, deep, deep lines in her cheeks. And that's the lung, right?
Yeah.
And they're sudden. And they're, you
Grief
know,
and
all of a
despair.
sudden, the grief and despair, right, hit. Her chin was all wrinkled like an orange, kidney, fear. And so what's beautiful is that when you begin the healing, the wrinkles go away, the chin, you know, opens up. And so you can see the changes in someone's face. I mean, it's spiritual healing Botox without
Right.
the
Exactly.
chemicals and the nastiness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Without botulism toxin, literally.
Mm-hmm. Jesus.
I know. That's the way that I feel about that in a nutshell, is like, oh my God,
Well,
I can't believe that people are
I,
even
I
entertaining that idea.
well, I had a woman come in when I was just a student, and she came in. She was skinny, skinny, skinny. And I said, "What's going on?" And she could hardly talk, and she had a little straw. She said, "I had Botox, and since the Botox, I couldn't eat for the last 7 months."
Was
And
it
so
just
she
like
could,
dysphagia or whatever? Dysphagia?
it was complete inflammation all over her throat. The woman couldn't swallow because the Botox had caused paralysis and
Wow.
inflammation in the muscles that required her to swallow. The woman had to do all sorts of weird treatments just to get food in her. She was
That's
pale and she came to see me. And so we gave homeopathic Botox, you know,
yeah,
helped a
that's
lot.
usually the thing, the hair of the dog.
Yeah, right. I mean, the hair of the dog, right? And so that helped a lot. And then, you know, we had to go into her own psychology about the anger that she had to the point that she wanted to mutilate herself. I mean, you think of all of these people who are mutilating themselves with breast implants, with all of this. I mean, it's cutting, right? It's
Yeah,
self-cutting, right?
yeah.
We think about, you know, it's not for beauty, it's self-cutting.
It's
And so
mutilation, yeah.
there's and so it's there's an anger behind that. There's a devastation behind that. There's a trauma behind that.
Yeah.
And so dealing with that brings the person to find their own beauty.
I think that that is a really important concept. There are a couple of really good books on emotional links to disease, but one of the titles, and I forget the exact title of it, but it's something basically like repressed emotions never die or something like that. Um, that's the
Emotions buried never die.
emotions buried never die. Exactly.
I like that book.
Yeah, well, and see, that is such an important concept for people to understand, because what drives the lack of inner beauty and the feeling of being beautiful? Like, I know people that
Right.
physiologically may not be, top 10 list of attractive, but they radiate a beauty of character, of personality, of all these
That's
other things.
right.
And it's really easy to find those people attractive, even if all of the geometrical and physiological alignment and all of the different proportions are not necessarily in place. That's one tiny
Which
very
change every
surface.
6 months, by the way. I mean, every 6 months there's a different proportion.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
ideal. I
So
mean, yeah.
yeah, you can't keep up with what people find beautiful, but what
Uh-uh.
you can do is radiate out your own inner beauty, and a lot
That's
of
right.
that comes down to getting rid of that emotional trauma that inhibits us and makes us feel ugly, less than, not worthy, etc. There's no amount of Botox or plastic surgery that's going to be able to fix that.
You
So
know, that's, you know, a beautiful part about homeopathy. And so you think of remedies like staphysagria, where there's anger, there's resentment, there's trauma, and there's a suppressed anger. And where do you put that anger? On yourself, right? And so staphysagria is a beautiful purple flower. It's the, you know, delphinum flower. They're beautiful, they're purple. You find them in garden shops. But that purple is like congealed blood, right? It's that
right,
anger
stagnant
that just
blood. Yeah.
stagnant, congealed blood. And
Oh,
so it helps to move that anger. And you find people who aren't able to express their anger, they need that Staphysagria. And then you have remedies like Thuya officinalis, which is, or did I say that correctly? Thuya, maybe placata. Thuya occidentalis, excuse me.
Now, Thuya,
And so,
you're pronouncing the J as if it's Spanish. It is a J, right? Like Thuja.
Thuja, you want to say Thuja, like Thu Jones or something like
I
that.
just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the same herb there.
Thuja,
Okay,
Thuya
perfect.
occidentalis.
Okay.
My goodness. I it's one of my favorite remedies. It's used for so many things that our society needs right now. But if you look at the tree and you take a look at the little branches, there's these little tiny warts. And warts represent, characteristically these ugliness, this hardness, this like hiding. And if you go inside, have you ever went inside of a thuya tree, Phoenix?
No.
Have you ever hid inside?
No.
Well, it's something you've got to try. Because if you go, there's these big thuya trees. And if you go inside, why, there's no branches. It's almost like a little hidden place that you can hide inside. And so it's really cool. You can sit there, drink your tea, whatever you want to do, depending how big the thuya tree is.
Right.
But it represents that hiding of self, or that shame. The shame that we have, where we just hide the warts, the shame. And so many of us suffer abandonment and shame. And, that's connected very much with the thuya tree. And, thuya is also really wonderful if you want to make some great wooden carvings or objects. And, thuya placata was the cedar tree, is so sacred to the Native American Indians. I'm, messing up all the Latin terminology because I just forget, but the cedar tree, it's used for canoes and special things, and it's sacred. And so the tree of life, right? I mean, Thuya is the tree of life. You help so many children now. It's being used for vaccinosis, so issues with, vaccines. You use Thuya as a homeopathic remedy. Issues with shame, you use Thuya, abandonment, warts, HPV, especially women who have vaginal warts, men who have, penile warts. You think about Thuya. So it's all these repressed, shameful things. And so, going into something that sort of society needs. Instead of Prozac in the water, which everyone's peeing out, we should put Thuya.
Yeah, seriously. I'm going to actually write that down. You mentioned that the homeopathic remedy of that works with genital warts, right?
Oh, yeah. And the herbal remedy,
because I knew that it works with like cystitis and uterine issues and even psoriasis and liver problems. I'm familiar with it as in like what can we call full potency?
Yeah. It's used for scurvy. I mean, that's how, so many people use it in so many different ways. But, what they would do, who was this wonderful woman? Toni Hudson. She had this wonderful protocol, and, she's a naturopath, and she would use Thuya for warts. And if you had genital warts, you would just paint the tincture onto the genitals.
Oh, that's smart.
And just do that. Or even onto the cervix if there are warts, Mm-hmm. And so there's just so many ways, but I like it homeopathically. You don't get sort of the side effects because Thuya is pretty gnarly and toxic at times. But, drop dose, the eclectics would use it. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful plant when used spiritually and metaphysically and homeopathically and herbally. I mean, all plants have that aspect to them, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like Paracelsus said that it is the dose that determines whether something is poison or a medicine. So. In today's age of rampant toxicity, it's important to have effective products at your disposal to maintain balance and well-being. One of the best products I've come across in over 15 years of actively looking for the best of the best for myself and my family is Zach Bush's Ion Biome products.
Ion gut health in particular supports the body's production of beneficial enzymes through cellular communication. These enzymes help support the seals between the cells in your gut lining, thereby giving you a first-line defense against invading toxins, like the infamous glyphosate that's so notorious for completely destroying gut microbiome health. The most recent scientific studies suggest that somewhere around 70% of the human immune system is built in the gut and the gut lining, and this barrier is critical for your total well-being. So if you're anything like me and you care about the total health of you and your family, then do yourself a favor and order some Ion Gut Health today. Visit phoenixaurelius.org, scroll to the Media tab, and select the Alchemi-Culture Podcast page. From there, you'll see a link for Ion Biome's Ion Gut Health. And, as with all the links on our podcast page, this company offers us a small percentage of sales to help support our research and make this podcast a possibility.
Which
That's right.
actually brings us into the whole concept of homeopathy. I remember reading some of the biography and even kind of works of Samuel Hahnemann, 15 to 20 years ago. And I remember him, talking about Paracelsus and Paracelsian works as being so key to that. And he took the entire concepts of ens veneni, or the toxicology component of spagyric medicine. He ended up saying, you know what, actually, if we can take things that are toxic in a normal dose or produce some sort of effect in their normal dose, for instance, let's say that plant X in a normal dose would cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea in this individual. If we were to homeopathically succuse the same remedy, then it can actually be used in order to treat diarrhea.
They found that for cinchona, right, which is the bark that you use for for malaria, right? And so what they would find is animals who had malaria would go and drink water from trees where there maybe like branches fell in the water of cinchona, and they would go and drink water there, and then they wouldn't have malaria, right? So they weren't actually going to the bark because that's pretty toxic, but where the water was, they would go there. Now you can say, okay, well, maybe that's just like a tea or a cold tea or something like that. But Hahnemann thought a little further and said, well, how about if we really dilute it and really get to that principle? Because Hahnemann was a teacher. He was spending that's how he made his money. He would teach rich kids. And so he read all of these books and all of these ancient books. And so they even say that the homeopathic remedies in the past weren't tinctures, Phoenix. They were spagyrics that were then made into homeopathic remedies.
That's what I heard too. And in fact, when we start to take a look at that realm, there is an entire realm of spagyric homeopathy that is now called electrohomeopathy. And it's based out of the teachings of Count Cesare Mate. And then you have like the Zimpel method, you have the Kruse method, you have like all these different methods that are still in United States, most European pharmacopoeias. I know they're definitely in Swiss and German and Italian pharmacopoeias. They are huge in India and also in the United Kingdom too. In fact, the entire World Electrohomeopathy Organization is there. Now, with electrohomeopathy, it's a little bit different though, isn't it? Because what we're looking at is a plant that has a healing property, and then we're just fermenting it, calcining all of the material that was fermented, and then adding the ashes back to that ferment in most cases, and then homeopathically succusing that.
Successing.
Yeah, in order to be able to produce an electrohomeopathic remedy with the same healing properties as the plant in full dose. So they're not looking at opposite effects, healing, like for instance, if this plant causes nausea in normal dose. So it's a little bit different, but the principles are related enough that we can take a look at those. And
I mean, you have to look at all, that's related to vibration and what fits the person. I mean, you think about what can be used with homeopathic, what remedies could be used homeopathically, and it's anything, right?
Anything, yeah.
Anything and everything. And it's where the person is. I mean, a colleague was just talking about this man with terrible, horrible, psoriasis, eczema, who knew on his hands? They had no idea. Doctor after doctor, all sorts of steroids, this and that, homeopath after homeopath. But no one asked him what he did for a living. And what he did for a living is he would peel eggshells.
For a living?
For a living.
Oh, wow.
And so he would peel eggshells, and he was part of like the manufacturing of like hard-boiled eggs, and all day he would peel eggshells. And like, the homeopath gave him eggshell. Gone.
Wow.
And
that is so smart.
no one's, saying, hey, you need, eggshells for your eczema, but it's the person, it's the journey, it's the travel, it's the understanding of what's going on, right? And so we can go really heavy and deep. I mean, I remember, talking about, the heavy cases, right? And so I had this little infant, she was, in and out with pneumonia, the hospital, this and that. Mom comes to me, she's only 6 months old and she's had pneumonia 4 to 6 times. I mean, that's intense. Antibiotics. God knows what the ecology of that child's, like
what ecology at that point?
right. No ecology. I'm like, Mom, be on a really like raw vegan diet, because that milk's gotta be pure. But, with that being said, I just talked to the mom, and the mom said, I said, so you had a baby? Yeah, one baby. Okay, one baby. And then I just felt something, because she said one baby. Yeah, I was pregnant with a baby. And she still paused and she continued. And I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, you were pregnant with one. She goes, well, actually, I was going to have twins, but 2 months into the pregnancy, I was told that there was only going to be one. And I said, okay, 2 months is pretty early, but that's still energy. And that little being was expecting another little being, and the lungs are a grief.
Yeah.
Right? So I gave amniotic fluid, the water, because water deals with grief. We know the water, we know the moon, we know emotions, we know the fluids. So I gave amniotic fluid, and I also gave Ignatia, which deals with grief, right? Saint Ignatius would sit by the tree and, console. And that baby has not had any pulmonary ailment since.
Awesome.
Right? So you can go there into those deep waters, but you can also think about eggshells and handling eggshells.
That is a really, really fantastic way of being able to take a look at various causations and realizing that a lot of it might have to do with our sympathy. I wonder, with the guy who was peeling eggshells, whether he enjoyed his job or didn't like his job. Now, if I was in his place, I would not enjoy that job.
Right.
And so that's probably this thing of like, I'm constantly handling, and there's this sense of resentment. There's a
Right.
So
I mean, who knows? I mean, I think of this case that I saw. It wasn't my case. It was, while I was in Greece, and I was with George Vithulkis, and, in one of his courses. And this child came in. He couldn't wear clothes, Phoenix. He was like half naked, and he couldn't wear a shirt because he had horrible, God knows what skin condition, red, pus all over. And, George Vithulkis sat with him and just talked to the kid. I mean, he'd had taken IV, all of that. Nothing.
Yeah.
And he said, what happened? And finally, he gains the kid's trust. And he said, well, I play rugby. And the kid's only like 13. And he said, when did you start? I started when I was 11. Okay. when he said, well, when I was 12 years old, I was with my friends and we went by a bar and these girls started to call after me. And he was raped. He was gang raped by the women who thought he looked older. He was only 12. And he had such a sense of I guess you want to say, anger,
Yeah.
grief, mortification,
So many
pain.
things. Yeah.
And so his body said, don't touch me.
Mm.
And all of his skin just showed like,
Yeah.
fuck off. Excuse my
Yeah.
French.
Yeah, no
right?
worries.
Like,
That's perfectly welcome here.
right. Like, don't touch me.
Yeah.
And so he gave him the I say we, George gave him Staphysagria, which is that remedy for suppressed anger, but also mortification. You give it to rape victims.
Yeah.
In India, I learned to also give carcinosin, which is the cancer, it's the breast cancer pustule, because people who carry that mortification many times get cancer. You look at Louise Hay, she was molested, she got vaginal cancer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so going into these realms with people and meeting them is so important.
That is absolutely really important, actually, to think about. It's so fascinating to me, all of the different types of substances that can, like we were saying, like anything, you get poisoned by a stereo, you can take components of the stereo and
Right.
homeopathically. But all joking aside, there is definitely a major element of that, in that you can use almost anything, the grossest, most insane types of things, as long as they have an energetic link to the condition or to the disease. It can essentially be tried out, because if I understand this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, please do, because I am not an expert in homeopathy. I know enough to be very dangerous, and that's about it. So with that,
which can be a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Being dangerous, living on the edge. So with that being said, though, you can really take, for instance, one of the biggest things that people are dealing with right now is like, okay, I got the jab, and I really regret that I got that jab. I was kind of forced into it in order to keep my job, whatever else, right? They didn't exactly put a gun to my head, but I had bills to pay. I couldn't just be destitute, etc. We can utilize that very same toxic material in a homeopathic remedy in order to be able to help to address that type of thing.
Yeah, and they do. And unfortunately, it's hard to get these homeopathic remedies. And it's it's difficult. It's difficult. There's as the system's not excited when you use things to heal, because it truly goes to the root. But then outside of that, you give the remedy that's the essentially homeotoxicology, right? So you give the toxin for the toxin without needing to know the symptoms of the person, right? Like, they took it, let's just give them that. But at the same time, what about another remedy? There's another remedy, and it's lac materna. And that remedy is
mother's milk.
Mother's milk.
Right.
And it deals with being forced to do something, that feeling of almost like that, like being like a torture victim on some level. I mean, this is a deep crime, right? I had to do it, and going in there and kind of needing to go back to like that nurturing element of your mom, and healing and attachment, but also that attachment with the government being so poisonous and sick, where that mother's milk that they're getting is what they conceive as mother's milk, right? Because there's a belief that the government is your mama.
Yeah, it's there to protect you. It's there to
protect you. It's there. It's your mama. But going back to the real mother's milk, what really is there to protect you and nurture you and feed you, brings an awakening to the person. So there's levels, right, that you go into, and you try to understand it from that perspective, so that that person, maybe if you just give them the Corona homeopathic toxicology, but then how about that philosophy that has caused them to go in, where they feel it's my job, where I get it, it's your job, but perhaps there's an opportunity that you could have had you left. Who knows, right?
Who
You have
knows?
to believe. You have to believe in, like, in a lot. You know, I believe in those angels. I believe in those spirit forces, that there's a protection as well, that you have to trust and fight for your freedom.
You know, there's a lot that can be unpacked when you're taking a look at a particular client. And I mean, because every issue that a person comes in with, some of them are related, of course. Many
Mhm.
of them are going to be somewhat disparately related, meaning that it's, you know, there's a commonality throughout their life of certain emotional patterns creating certain experiences that create certain belief systems that ultimately manifest as some sort of disease, right? So
Mm.
there is so much that you can do when you're looking, and I know with your acupuncture and Chinese medicine background, you treat the individual, not the condition, right? So what does that look like for you? Do you usually have a lot of clients on multiple different remedies at a time?
Yes. In different ways. For example, I'll give you a great example. So let's say I look in someone's eye, right? Because people, they know what's happening with them, but do they know? Are they in touch with what's happening to them?
Mm,
And so when you look at your eye, especially your sclera, your iris, the sclera is interesting because there's a sclera map, and the blood vessel starts somewhere and it goes somewhere else. Now it could start at one organ or one aspect of your etheric body, emotional, karmic body, and then go into organs, right? Because there's etheric sclerology. There's so many aspects to the eye, right? The eye is the window of the soul. And so, you know, a great example was I was seeing someone with cancer, right? And the inner canthus on their left side, you know, right here,
mhm.
and their lateral canthus was fire red, but especially that inner canthus, real red. And that has to deal with our relationship with our mama. And especially on the left side. And it went out there was a big blood vessel that came out and went right to the breast section. Person had breast cancer. So immediately we had to talk about mama and the
Yeah.
relationship that was causing such a strain in the heart, that in order for the body to protect the heart organ, it had to bring the pain out to the breast, which, by the way, if you understand acupuncture, the liver goes through the breast. The
Yep.
liver holds anger. You know, all these women giving, breast milk, you know, breast milk physically, metaphysically, and then pissed off about it, right? And so addressing that heart breast connection and going back. And so really the eye is that window, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the eye. I had a testimony with another man that I saw with cancer, sigmoid colon cancer. And he told me, I said, let's go through all your symptoms, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and I said, anything else? And he's like, and he starts moving his foot. And I just, what's going on with your foot, right? I mean, let's talk about your foot. And he goes, well, I've got plantar fasciitis. How many years? 20. Oh, 20. Wow.
Wow.
It's an inflammation of that foot there in that little section. What section's that? Phoenix, it was the sigmoid colon.
Wow.
And so I said to him, as you begin healing deeply your cancer, right? That plantar fasciitis is going to say bye-bye. And he laughed. And he said, what's the connection? I said, look at the reflexology map. Sigmoid colon,
Yeah.
right? So when we have these little aches and pains or weird spots or this, we have to ask ourselves, where, our body holds inflammation. And when we go and suppress that inflammation, let's say we go and we put topical steroids and this, and we inject stuff in our foot, where is it going? It's going back into that part of our body. And the body's trying to get rid of it. And that's why we have to be so cognizant about things like suppression. Skin symptoms should not be suppressed. You don't die from the skin. The skin is an organ of elimination.
Mm-hmm.
And it's protecting your organs. And so really understanding the whole picture and really allowing the educational component for the person too. Because so many people don't get that.
Yeah, totally.
So much what I do is education. As I heal myself with my little cough.
Yeah, exactly. A little cough.
Wear coats outside, Dr. Lopez.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if it's cold, match your environment.
We were coming from Athens and I didn't have a coat.
Wow.
It was gonna be hot. December something. Should have been hot, really, Phoenix.
No, shouldn't have been hot in December. No, that's not common. So, well, that's really fascinating. Now, when I was talking to Sakis last week or the week before, he was telling me that you were doing some pretty cutting edge things with homeopathy in terms of taking, just everyday random type of toxins and materials that people have been exposed to and turning those into homeopathic remedies. Do you have any particular examples of some things?
I mean, the simple example, he's talking about Ton Jensen's work, right? And so Ton Jensen's a homeopath in the Netherlands, and he has the philosophy that essentially any toxin you took in your past is inhibiting your current healing. And a great example is the birth control pill. And so, giving a homeopathic birth control pill, where you start with 1 week with a 30C, the next week with a 200C, and going upward that way for a month, really helps to detox that birth control pill and then regulates the hormonal system, mind and body. And he believes the endocrine system is one of the most important systems to handle. And when we think about the endocrine system, we think about, our hormones, and then we think about hormones, and we think about water, and we think about emotions, and we think about the moon. And so I can really gather that would be a very important system. And so, so working with whatever toxins and whatever organ systems have been compromised because of the toxins that we took, were at a time when we were unconscious as to how severe it was. So many women are taking the emergency contraceptive pill. So many women are taking birth control, right? And birth control takes us away from our cycle, takes away from our humanity, our connection to our intuition, to the moon. Right? I mean, it's a serious, serious warfare that was put on women. It really, really was. Is. And it's taking away the magic. And so women need to get back to their magic, regulate their hormonal body, and then they can heal things like the thyroid, which helps with what? Their voice, right? The chakra right here. And I mean, just so many of our hormones are related to our emotions, emotional body, our expression in our world. And so, yes, I kind of went off track, but that's essentially what I'm looking at, what toxins did the person take that has caused them to have a, what do we call it? A blockage to really getting the healing that they deserve.
I'm going to bring this kind of personally because you have me very, very interested. All of the health symptoms that I started to have personally happened after an incident of severe serotonin syndrome that happened to me unknowingly in 2017. And when I went to the ER, because I didn't know, well, in fact, I had passed out. I wasn't available. My phone was not connecting to the internet. I was way up in the mountains above Boulder, Colorado. And my friend had just left. He went to this concert because he was in a new band. It was like their debut show. He left. I'm all alone, no vehicle at his house. The last thing he says to me is, eat anything that you want in the fridge. So he's a bachelor. I go into the fridge. There's like
beer,
leftovers, in styrofoam. Yeah, exactly. There were a few beers, absolutely. Half-drunk bottle of whiskey, a bottle of mustard maybe. And then
lucky you.
He had these bag full of chocolate bars that had been made by a mutual friend of ours from Santa Fe. And he was a raw chocolatier, and he had the most amazing chocolates that I had ever had in the past. But he had tons of them, and they were just like, fun sized little bars that were individually wrapped. So I end up eating one of those. He has a package of tortillas. I end up taking a tortilla, heating that up, throwing a little butter on it, and eating that. And then I was like, shit, I'm kind of tired. So I lay down, I take a nap. When I wake up, I'm looking at the house outside. And the house is like waving at me. And I was like, oh, it's so nice when the house wait, houses don't wave. What the hell is going on here? And then I stand up and I have marinero, right? I'm like, I have seasickness. Like I was on deep in the jungle on ayahuasca type of seasickness at night. And my mouth is just completely dry. I'm trying to drink water. I'm trying to flush whatever's going, whatever's happening. I had taken a nap outside, but it wasn't that hot, and I was in the shade. It was in the middle of July, and the whole reason I was there was that I was building a big aquaponic greenhouse connected to his kitchen. And so I was in this greenhouse that at that point didn't have a lot of ventilation, but I was going in and out of a highly air-conditioned space, making sure that I was cool. I had coconut waters, I had pinches of salt, I had plenty of water, I was staying hydrated, my blood glucose was stable, all of the physical bases covered, right? So I'm thinking, well, my liver is shutting down from all my medical training. If I'm experiencing these symptoms, my liver is shutting down and I'm dying, and I couldn't tell you why. So I try and call 911. My phone won't work. There's no connection. And I go and think, well, maybe I have heat stroke because I was outside. Maybe,
Sure.
I'm very susceptible to heat stroke anyway.
Right.
So I get in the shower and I completely cold water. I couldn't feel the sensation of water. Couldn't feel that things were touching me. Couldn't feel that the water was cold. Couldn't feel temperature at all. Tried turning it hot. Couldn't feel temperature at all. And so I get out and I try and just breathe and focus on what's going on. And I end up talking to my mom, and she's like, well, doing qigong stuff. She's like, just say how la, and like focus on this. And I'm sitting there.
I love your mom.
Oh yeah, she's great. She knows a lot of things. Again, enough to be dangerous about a lot of things. So she's having me, just try and relax, and I can't relax. And I'm like, I'm so confused. I mean, the most crazy confusion. So I end up trying to take another shower. I try calling the ambulance again, 911 again. The call won't go through. With my last little bit of like intuition and like, it's like at this point, it's like pure survival intuition that's driving me, because I have no mental faculties about me whatsoever. I ended up texting my mom my address and saying, call 911, send them here. My phone won't work. And internet would come in and out, and phone signal would come in and out at this place, largely based maybe on barometry or humidity, all the different types of factors. She ended up getting that text, who knows when, and calls ambulance. I'm naked. I'm in the shower. Ambulance has to kick open the door because it's locked. and they come and get me. They resuscitate me and get me on the stretcher. I'm coming to in the back of the ambulance, and then they drive me to Boulder Foothills Community Hospital, which I would not ever suggest anybody go there. If you have the opportunity to go to a different hospital, a different emergency room, please do, because I went there and there were clear signs that my neurological system was impacted. I even told them and had the articulative capacity to tell them, it feels like I'm on ayahuasca, but I haven't taken any substances that I know of. I had a chocolate bar and a tortilla, and then I started feeling like this. And they said, well, did you have any beer? I said, well, I had a beer last night. Oh, and where are you from? Oh, I'm from Utah. Oh, it's just, listen, bud, you probably had too much cannabis and you're dealing with elevation sickness. And then they run blood panels on me and say, oh, you know what? Your potassium is critically low. Your sodium is critically low. Your electrolytes are ultra low. You're dehydrated. And it's just this. They put 3 bags of saline in me at the cost of $1,700 per bag. Or I think it was actually 4 bags. And then they said, all right, you got to go home. I was naked. All I had was the medical gown that I had. I had nobody in town that I knew. My other friend was playing a show. They just kicked me out. And I said, well, where am I supposed to go? And they looked at me and said, well, that's not our problem, and just kicked me out. And so I ended up calling a cab company, and the cab driver I got a hold of, it was just such a unique serendipitous experience, because I explained my situation. And he said, you know what, that happened to me in Kansas one time a couple of years ago. He's like, if you have money up at the place where I'm taking you to, he's like, you can pay me when we get there, and that's fine. And he even got a towel for me, because, you know, I'm bare ass, at the back of my medical gown. He has a towel for me to sit on in the back seat and everything.
Wow.
It was that single act of kindness that was good. I remember looking in the mirror, though. This is about 6 hours after the experience happened. I'm still in the throes of this terrible experience. Just got released from the hospital. Nothing is working right. My heart is going crazy. Blood pressure through the roof, heart rate through the roof. And I look in my eyes and I think, this feels like the most intense mushroom experience possible. So I wait until the next day. My friend doesn't get home till like 3 a.m. By that time, I'm asleep. I am just completely drained from this whole experience. I talk to him the next day and I tell him, yeah, so, here's what happened to me. I was in the ER and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, what chocolates did you eat? And I said, well, the ones in the fridge. He says, oh, and how many did you eat? And I said, well, just one. He's like, you ate a whole one? And I said, yeah. There's 14 grams of psilocybin extract, not psilocybin extract, which is the equivalent of about 4.5 to 5 ounces of psychedelic mushrooms in a single bar. And he's a psychiatrist that at the time was running clinical studies at Europa University. And so he would shave off a tiny little bit of that and give that to an individual.
Right.
Here I am. I had the whole damn bar. So it definitely threw me into a state of serotonin syndrome. Now, what I ended up doing for the 90 days after that, I was dying, Karina, like literally dying, and couldn't figure it out. And I was going to my mom's house to finally die, because I had hypoglycemia so bad that if I looked at a carb, any carb, my blood sugar would spike, and then I would just drop and go unconscious, just like that. And then I had hypokalemia on top of that, critically low blood potassium. And so my heart was stopping 5, 7, 15, 35 times a day. And I was going unconscious 7, 10, 15 times. So it was horrific. It was the worst thing. Nori couldn't leave me unattended. And eventually, we ran out of money, and it's like, well, she's got to go to work. And
sure.
I'm going to die. I'd seen endocrinologists, I'd seen naturopaths, I'd seen everybody. And they were like, yeah, well, we don't know what's going on with you, bud. So
did anybody give you homeopathic mushrooms?
I did. So as I was waiting for my mom to come pick me up, I took a look at psychedelic mushroom blend that I had made called Protemia. Yeah. And initially I had developed this when I lived in Portland for individuals that had bipolar disorder.
Sure.
And so it was, cacao, heshu wu, goji berry.
Oh, sounds nice.
Yeah, Mucuna pruriens, psychedelic mushroom, and a couple of other different types of things that are in there that are kind of escape me at the moment. But it is meant to help to tonify key amine neurotransmitters and be able to tonify the systems that are able to deal with that balance. And I just looked at it and I thought, fuck, maybe the hair of the dog that bit me. And it was kind of like cacao and mushrooms were the two main things that were in that I had eaten that had caused this symptom. So I took that off the shelf. Now, it wasn't a homeopathic remedy, but it was in spagyric form. And so I took it to my mom's house. And that night I told her, you know, Mom, I maybe have 3 days left in me. Like my heart can only do this so many times. So I'm going to try this remedy. I'm going to write down in this journal how much I'm taking, when I'm taking it, etc. I've written down the ingredients and how I formulated it. If you need to take me to the ER or anything else, take this journal with me. That will provide them with the most up-to-date information. She says, okay, I don't know what else you have to lose, son. And she was like, you're going to heal yourself the whole time. My mom was like, you're the best healer I know. You're going to heal yourself. If anybody
I love her.
do this,
I love her.
You're going to take care of it. And Nori felt the same way. They were like, you have so much to do. This is not your time. You're going to figure this out somehow. We don't know how, but you're going to do it. So I ended up taking it, and I had to take enormous doses. Normal dose of a spagyric is like 3 drops. I was taking 85 drops at a time. Good. And it wasn't eliciting any sort of psychoactive effect because the amount of psychedelic mushrooms in there is so low. Well, for the first time that night, I said, Mom, I'm feeling so stable. I want a tiny little piece of toast, right? Just make me a piece, but I'm just going to break off a piece and I'm going to try it. Now, if I would have done that even 2 days prior, 1 day prior, my glucose would have spiked for about 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah.
And I would drop and go unconscious. And then you'd have to stick honey. We used honey instead of glucose strips. You'd have to stick a decent amount of honey under my tongue and get it down my throat. And then that would kind of bring me to a little bit. So I took that little piece of bread. I was fine. I did it again about an hour later. I was still fine. The next morning I woke up and I said, and this was after about 10 different 85 drop doses. So I've had a very significant amount, 850 drops, many milliliters of this spagyric tincture that I made, spagyric formulation rather. So that took care of all of the symptoms. Since that time, I've never had hypokalemia and I've never had hypoglycemia, but I keep having this vitamin D issue, which we were talking about before this call. And every single winter, my heart nearly stops. And when I say nearly stops, I mean, I have severe tachycardia and cardiac arrhythmia for about 3 weeks out of the year. And for the first couple of years, we didn't know what it was. We thought maybe it was an anemic issue.
I think you absolutely, have to think about taking it homeopathically.
That's what I was going to say.
By using your spagyric. Now you can do it radionic style, where you take your spagyric, of the mushroom mix, and I would find out exactly what he had. That way, you have that exact sort of thing. And I would make a radionic out of that spagyric, and I would go slowly, where I would up the radionic level so that your body, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't just go like, whoa, let's just go up real high.
Well, why don't I just gradually do this as an actual remedy? I mean, I'm more than willing to turn that into an actual remedy.
Well, yeah, you'd have to put in a 30C potency, then a 200 potency, then a 1M potency, then a 10M potency. And so you'd have to gradate it up, and, do it that way, where you would do it for 1 week, the 30C twice a day. Next week, 200C. Next week, you can do, 1M, or then the next week you can do 10M. Now, it's up to how you're feeling. If you're like, hey, I don't want to jump from a 200C to a 1M, then you can do, 300C, 400C, 500C, 600C. If you're real sensitive, you can start with an LM1, which is, going to be very much more wider, right? Because LM1 is 1 to 500. And so you can do LM1. LM2, LM3, LM4, LM5, and you can go up even daily. It's or you can even do it through the Fibonacci sequence, where you can go up using the Fibonacci sequence and feel how, that sequence goes to. So if you're going to make it, I would think of the Fibonacci sequence so that it kind of really goes in that way, right? So think of, that magic number and sort of, or whatever sequence of numbers are attuned with you, right? And so there's ways to think about it in terms of the skill, because now we're talking about potency, and we're talking about how to use potency, right? Because there's the remedy, but then there's the potency. Where do we start with that? And so the Fibonacci sequence is a nice place to go to, especially with someone who's sensitive like you. And I would think about LM potency. Hahnemann, his last Organon book, which was not read by Kent, who the North American homeopaths, sort of idealize, Kentian homeopathy. Kent didn't read the last Organon. The last Organon was using LM potencies, and that's 1 to 500, giving more of a breath of space for the person to really take in the vibration. That 1 to 500 is easier. And so it's used for people who are very sensitive or have had these serious medications, or who have gone on trips like yourself where, whoa, sensitive, we don't want to aggravate, right? Because homeopathy aggravates. Sometimes you get a little worse before you get better. And that could be a good thing, because the better is fantastic. The skin symptoms are gone, the whatever issues you have are gone, but, knock on wood. But if you're sensitive, you want to go slowly. So I would think about the Fibonacci sequence.
Okay. And so
thinking about
again, you said like LM1, maybe go to a 30C after that, 200C, then move.
I would do Fibonacci sequence. So what's the Fibonacci sequence? LM1, and then what? LM2, and then what? LM4. LM3, LM2 plus 1 is 3.
Yeah, and then LM5.
Oops.
Okay, so that's the way that you. Okay.
That would be the Fibonacci sequence.
Okay.
The way Ton Jensen does it, he does 30C, 200C, 1M, 10M, and if you're sensitive, he'll start with an LM12. Well, LM12, 30C, 200C, 1M, 10M. I'm saying with you, I'm just kind of feeling your Fibonacci.
Keep staying at that low energetic.
I would do Fibonacci, and I would do it LM1, be on it for a few days. You could even do the Fibonacci sequence with the days, or the hours, or however deeply you want to do it. You're your own healer. So you decide.
Yeah, and I can run analysis on this too to see where I should start.
Right.
So
write an analysis. See, should you do it with the Tangency way? Should you do it the Fibonacci sequence? Is there a sequence that runs with you astrologically that makes sense with you? Is there a day you should start? Is there a time that you should start? All of these things matter. So many homeopaths wouldn't even give remedies on certain days based on the moon.
Right.
And so, where's fire? Where's fire for you? What planets?
Yeah,
how are we going to cool that fire?
Actually, are in fire signs.
Right, I'm sure. And so, how are you going to cool that fire? What day would be good for you? And so maybe a full moon day. I don't know. You have to decide.
All right, cool. Well, that gives me a lot of specific types of things to take a look at, because as you were talking, it was like, I really need to take a look into this, because, like I said, the major life-threatening symptoms that we're presenting, that, those are taken care of. But, and then, I've still got all of this trauma. I have a general distrust of emergency room and of ambulance people.
Do you know?
Oh yeah, go figure, right? So it's like there's that. There's also, like the feeling of everybody else is incompetent, that can deal with my health, like they don't know what I'm going through.
But that's also a demon, isn't it?
It could be, because it prevents me from oftentimes looking at, or
they say homeopathy is a modern day what do you call the
exorcism?
It's a modern day exorcism, because you cancel out the evil, right? And they use the word evil in those books, right? You're canceling out the evil. And so, the aspect of your sun, right? The sun is what? Haughty. I'm the sun, man. I radiate. Ain't nobody gonna go on my shadow. I know everything. I am the sun. The sun has to be haughty because it's the sun. And so there's that aspect of how do we excise that to allow you to come down and be present with others that might know more than you or know different than you, right? I mean, I'll tell you this. I just had this case of a child with eczema, all right? Steroids since he was 6 months old, IV. I mean, not IV, just injected steroids. Can you imagine injecting a steroid in a child at 6 months old?
It's crazy.
Kid came to see me at 3.5. We worked with the homeopathy. Amazing. Skin symptoms, beautiful. I can send you pictures. I mean, beautiful. And if you want, I will. Now, what happened? Suddenly, the kid got a fever. And he was sickle cell recessive. And so we started working on it, but it got really bad. And I told him, the mom said, should I go to the emergency room? And I said, I guess you're going to have to, right? And all my ego dropped, Phoenix. I couldn't handle this kid's fever, and this kid was pale and could have died. And he went to the hospital. They went to the doctor, and the clinic actually said, go back home. You're okay. You'll be fine. So the mom went back home. The next day, the kid was worse. And I said, come on, you got to go. Then they went to the emergency room. There's a clinic, sent them back home. And I said, damn. And I contacted my colleague as he was on the way to the emergency room. My colleague recommended some remedies. But no matter, the remedies were helping, but no matter what, the kid had to stay in the hospital for whatever amount of days on IV antibiotics. I was heartbroken. Because this, sends the kid's level of health back and all of that. But I will say this, we don't have homeopathic clinics who are working on fevers and flus in the late 1800s. That was the specialty, right? You see a homeopath for a flu, for a fever, they knock that shit out, period. They were good. They knew, right?
Yeah.
But now we had, I had to contact my colleague earlier. I had to, there were things I could have done, finding my friends. And so that was a big ego bringer. And maybe my colleague couldn't have helped. Who knows? Maybe this child's karma was meant to go there. Who knows? But the fact is that there aren't homeopathic hospitals out. There aren't hospitals filled with Spagyrics for people.
Yeah.
We're at a time where many of us feel alone, and many of us have seen the miracles that so many haven't. And then our ego comes up. But the truth is, there's many of us that are doing incredible things and are allies. We have to keep close. And for that reason, we can't be that sun who shoots everybody away. We have to bring in all the healers that are doing amazing work, because when we're on our knees, we need each other.
You have spoken to some very deep aspects, some very deep core wounds that were brought up by that experience, or at least very significantly exacerbated by that experience and several experiences thereafter. So thank you for sharing that wisdom and speaking directly to this example, because it's something I needed to hear personally. And hopefully some of our audience members can relate, even if not the same experience, by drawing.
It's like we do our best, but we're not God, and we have to draw on the love and the passion of everybody. And, at that moment, thank God that ER was there. I mean, it's like we have to just be humble and at the same time keep fighting to make our medicine accessible. Because the more people who hone our skills, who know our stuff, the more conversations, the more community, the better and the more productive and efficient we will be at helping the people who need our services. Because we help. We see people We're the ones who put people in remission from so many, many different illnesses, mind, spirit, and body.
Fantastic, fantastic, deep reminder for me to, yeah. And I think, we may have figured out a lot of my sensitivities to the sun that have happened since this time too. So I can't thank you enough.
I can't thank you enough, Phoenix.
So with that being said, though, you obviously have some extraordinary insights on disease and on illness causations, and look at it from a much, say, different perspective than what a lot of individuals do, especially because I find it to be pretty grounded in the approach as well. Like oftentimes there's a book out there called Metaphysical Anatomy. You'll go to people who are trained
Oh, I love Yvette Rose.
Yep. And they'll just, look up some sort of prescription and say, oh, you're feeling this, it must be this. It's so much more subjective than that, realistically.
Yeah.
And it looks like you take a lot of this into account. So are you currently taking international clients?
Everywhere and anywhere. Anyone who wants to see me, I'm so happy. I'm only online. So wherever, if you're in Greece, I can see you in person. But but that's more rare, as I have my little baby boy to take care of. And so being online is really special, although I miss the body work. I miss, the Tibetan bowls, the gongs, the womb massages, the moxa, the sacral moxa. There's something special when, you have that touch element.
Totally.
But so many people now are working with me, and instead what we do is we do the teaching. So we teach them how to heal themselves now. Now they can't just come and get all this work on me and here's the supplements, It's look into your eye. We're on Zoom and they're seeing their eye. They're recording the session. They get it. They get what's happening deeply. And then these are the organs we have to get into. This is where the toxins happen. Mind, body, environment. And, what's beautiful is that, you go in deeper and you look at the iris of the eye, or you look at the ear, or you look at the hand or the foot, and there's a chronology. And so there's an age and the organ related, especially in the eye. There's the organ that could be potentially compromised during that time. And so it's really special. I just see that there's no, I'm gonna have to tell Sakis because the computer's dying.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap up, actually, because we are near the end of our hour anyway. So with this, Karina, you mentioned that you're online. Where can people find you online?
VitalistHealingTraditions.com.
Fantastic.
It's a wonderful site. We've got our wellness signature program where we teach people how to really, just everything from assessing themselves with their eyes, homeopathy, herbalism, naturopathy, and then we have our chef and alchemist Sakis teaching them the healing of foods based on what's going on with them. So it's a beautiful process. If
people wanted to use this to get a hold of you, there is a contact form here. Is that the best way to?
Yep, that's it. That's the best way.
Fantastic. Now, do you have any other classes or other things that are coming up?
We have our sourdough bread course that Sakis has done, and that is our little baby.
Yes.
And so it's a special one. Bread. You go to any Greek funeral, they're giving you wheat porridge because it opens the heart, and so that's our love child.
That is so great. I love that. Wonderful. Well, so anything else that you would like to tell the listeners about, or let them know a little bit more about your practice or how you work or anything like that?
Sure. Essentially, we start with the iology appointment where we look and we see what's going on. We then go on to homeopathy. We do some naturopathic work where we're doing organ cleanses, detoxification, rejuvenation. You work with a diet with sakis. He's teaching you full-on medicinal herbal foods based on what's going on. We do it's vitalist therapeutics where it's, we're thinking about all the alternative therapeutics, vitalist assessment, what's happening, vitalist praxis where we're thinking about the mind and the body. So it's really a full-on revolution to healing your mind, body, and soul is what we provide.
Super, super awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I am so excited that we had this conversation. I want to have you back when the computer is more full charge, because there are plenty of other questions that I have here that I would love to chat with you about. So we'll cycle back around to you here in a little while. But in the meantime, again, Karina, thank you so much for coming on
Thank you.
and for sharing experience, and, personally for speaking directly to some of my
Absolutely.
experience. I am excited to get in the lab and to play with some of these substances.
And contact me. I can send you some aspects. Massimo Mangliovari wrote a wonderful book about mushrooms. Let me see where it is. If I can find it in 1 second, that would be great. I don't know if I can though. I'm a little bit chaotic with my books. Ah, here it goes. Found it. Here it goes. Fungi. Massimo Mangliovari.
Okay,
And he wrote the homeopathic book about fungi. So maybe that might be interesting for you.
that would be very interesting for me. Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at that. I'm pulling that up right now. Super cool. All right. Well, again, thank you, Karina, and thank you to all of our listeners out there. If you liked this podcast, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're watching or listening through YouTube or YouTube Music. If you're listening through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of the other places, please be sure to share this podcast with those that you think may be able to gain some benefit. And like all of these podcasts that we do, we're always trying to expose new, different healing methodologies, new different ways of approaching disease and philosophy, even, and culture and living, and so on and so forth. And so it's just a great way to expose ideas to those that you care for and those that you would like to see grow. So please be sure to share this. And as always, until next time, keep well, many blessings of happiness and health. And we hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season.